Chronicles, and when he is first introduced, he is such a badass villain. Matter of fact, in like a Dragon number 300, he ranks as one of the top villains of all time in D&D. And he is so iconic they used his image for the Death Knight in 5e D&D.
Yeah, and it's a big name, and even those people who are not familiar with Dragonlance know that character. And the reason I can say that is because I'm not a huge Dragonlance fan myself. I've only read, the Chronicles once, a couple decades ago, and it really never impressed me, so I didn't keep going, whereas you've read dozens of Dragonlance novels. I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
And I'm Nerdarchy Dave.
Welcome to Nerdarchy,
for nerds, by nerds.
All right, what are we up to today, Dave?
All right, so last week, I believe, we had gotten the books for Dragonlance from Wizards of the Coast. They were nice enough to send us a stack of books as well as the box sets that they're doing, right? And we showed them off on one of our live chats. With that, all the extras end up in our giveaway pile. So if you happen to be a Patreon or a member of our newsletter, every month we select a winner who's going to win some cool stuff.
But, that leads us to looking through the book and seeing what's there. And you had, at first glance, you had a WTF moment.
Yeah, it wasn't even, I didn't even look through the book. It was like I saw someone's article or post, and it just showed the stat block for Lord Soth. And I was like, I can't believe it. He doesn't even have resistances or immunity to non-magical weapons, right? It's been so long since we did the Death Knight stuff, and it turns out no Death Knights have, which is dumb to me. But also, after some introspection and thinking about it, I was like, well, I mean, a Death Knight is a CR 17, the Lord Soth is a CR 19, and it was like, well, does it matter if peasants can hurt Lord Soth? Because he's going to murder them all with ease anyway.
What is the chance that you are going to be coming up against Lord Soth without magical gear?
Right, so that's just it. And so many classes, well, a Circle of the Moon Druid, a monk, Path of the Beast, Barbarian. I think all of those and more that I'm just not even thinking of off the top of my head don't even need magic weapons because they're just considered magic attacks.
Yeah, they get to become magic. Yeah. And all of that being said, those people who use weapons and those that use spells, there's so many ways that it's just like, all right, this just really doesn't make a difference at that kind of level of the game.
Yeah, so with that, we're going to go through, we're going to talk about Lord Soth and, our experience with Lord Soth throughout the ages, some notable things about, fun facts about Lord Soth. Lord Soth compared to regular Death Knights, and Lord Soth kind of compared to other Challenge 19s.
All right, so the first appearance is the Dragon of Spring Dawning. The evil goddess Takesis launched the War of the Lance to conquer Krynn and wanted Lord Soth to assist her armies. Soth informed Takesis he would only be willing to serve the Dragon High Lord, Takesis' top generals, with enough courage and strength to survive one night in Dargod Keep. Only the Dragon High Lord, known as the Blue Lady, Kitiara Uth Matar, accepted this challenge. Kitiara survived the night, winning Soth's service.
So we've got that, and that's from the first appearance of Lord Soth, and that is from the, like you said, the Dragons of Spring Dawning, and, Chronicles, and when he is first introduced, he is such a badass villain. Matter of fact, in a Dragon number 300, he ranks as one of the top villains of all time in D&D. And, he is so iconic they used his image for the Death Knight in 5e D&D.
Yeah, and it's a big name, and even those people who are not familiar with Dragonlance know that character. And the reason I can say that is because I'm not a huge Dragonlance fan myself. I've only read, the Chronicles once, a couple decades ago, and it really never impressed me, so I didn't keep going, whereas you've read dozens of Dragonlance novels.
Yeah, I've read almost all of them except for the stuff about the twins, which all my friends were like gaga about because of Raceland. And I was like, I don't know, it didn't do as much for me. And maybe some of the little bit more of the recent stuff I haven't gone back and read yet. In one of the spin-offs, they actually kill off Lord Soth. Spoilers if you haven't read this stuff from 20, 30 years at this point ago. Sorry. But then they bring him back for Ravenloft, and he gets two novels in Ravenloft, and they're really good. There's a lot of great Ravenloft novels, but the Lord Soth books are my favorite. Knight of the Black Rose and Spectre of the Black Rose are two of them, and he's got this awesome henchman that is this dwarf that's a werebadger.
That sounds awesome.
And part of Ravenloft's thing is to torment the Dark Lords, and his torment is they basically have his whole land that he ruled as a Knight of Solamnia, and the Banshees will wail and retell his story night after night, but they always tell it wrong. And that's the thing that upsets him the most. It's not like he knows what he did, and he fully embraces the mistakes that he's made, and given the opportunity to fix them and do them again, he does the mistakes all over again. Matter of fact, like he was like they end his stint in Ravenloft ends with Ravenloft kicking him out because he is so unrepentant in what he did. And I think he makes his way back to actually Kryn.
Yeah, so like you've got, quite a dynamic, story, and as we can see, I mean, he might not be Vecna, but he's still pretty damn evil.
He is pretty damn evil. But he does have a sense of honor. He will not attack a foe before they can ready their weapon or ambush a foe. He wants you to know he's coming, and he wants you to see and feel the dread. That is Lord Soth.
And he's pretty confident that he's going to kick your ass, so why not,
But now we want to see, like, does novel Lord Soth and stat Lord Soth kind of hold up?
So, I mean, it is always tough because when you start looking at novelizations, everything is scripted the way the author wants that story to go. And the villains in novels, while they can be, challenging and hard, they are the villains. They are expected to be overcome to some degree or some manifestation thereof, and the heroes need to rise above. So are the heroes able to handle the stat block, or is the stat block too easy for what we see of the heroes?
All right, so now let's start looking at Lord Soth versus the Death Knight and how they stack up. The very first thing we have is their type. A Death Knight is a medium undead, where Lord Soth is also a medium undead, but he has the Paladin subtype tag. Yeah, I guess tag would be the best word for it. Which the only thing I can think of that really means is if something only Paladins can use, then Lord Soth could use it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a new thing that D&D has started doing, because like there's certainly things that have existed in the monster manual and some of the later books that do feel like they would fit into some things that are blocks or tags that don't have that. So maybe that's something that 1D&D is going to kind of correct.
To implement, yeah. I don't know if it's a correction, because I feel like 5e was more like, well, you're the DM, you can do what you want. And it feels like a step back to 3rd edition, where we're going to quantify everything so that there's rules for it, which I'm somewhat not a fan of.
I mean, you still, as the DM, you've got the power to, kind of adjust in whatever direction you want to either slim things down or, more explain things as you see fit.
So the next big change is alignment. Lord Soth is lawful evil, totally makes sense. He believes in rules, and also figuring out how to break them, or the loopholes for them, I believe. And then the Death Knight, the traditional Death Knight, is chaotic evil.
Yeah, I think that completely measures up and makes a lot of sense. If you are an honorable person, you are going to fall more into the lawful angle of things. And if you are downright evil but honorable, lawful evil is completely perfect.
Now we have AC, and the Death Knight actually has a higher AC than Lord Soth, 18 versus 20, because Lord Soth does not use a shield. But he also doesn't use a big weapon, which we can get into later, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But he's never depicted with a shield, therefore he has no shield.
Again, that's a situation that's a pretty easy fix. You could strap on a shield, or heck, even a +1 shield if you really want, or higher if you really don't really want to. And, somehow, if they defeat him, well, then they get this, evil shield depicting, whatever evil manifestation you want on a shield that Soth would use.
Next up is hit points.
So Soth is looking at a 228, where a Death Knight is only 180, so he's certainly more potent.
Yeah, well, he's got a higher challenge, so he's got more hit dice at 24 compared to 19, and that is exactly where those extra hit points come from.
Yeah, so nothing fancy, nothing to try and figure out. It's all just, in the dice.
His stats, we have 2 that are different, and that is strength and charisma. And, Death Knights are girly men with their piddly 20s, where Lord Soth has a 22.
Charisma's not all that much different. Soth is sitting at a pretty 20, where Death Knights are only at an 18.
So next up is saves, and the only difference is their charisma saves. Lord Soth is 1 higher, and that is exactly because his charisma is 1 modifier higher.
When it comes to languages, Soth has got a little bit more, and he's looking at Common, Infernal, and Solamnia.
Versus, Common and Abyssal. Also, that really goes gets into the alignment breakdown too. Infernal and Bizzle, one being a lawful plane and one being a chaotic plane.
And the fact that Soth is going to be from Dragonlance, it only makes sense to give him a Dragonlance style language, but it definitely makes a nice divide. When you compare them because of the different, essentially fiendish languages that they know.
Here's the main thing that I think really makes Lord Soth a higher challenge than the Death Knight, and that's the fact that he has legendary resistance as well as legendary actions.
And when you start talking about a powerful level solo monster, you really do need to slap those things in there, because if you want that to be the challenge that he is expected to do, all those spells that just shut down a single enemy, banishment, hold person, or anything along those lines, you need to be able to just be like, nope, I passed that saving throw. Let's move on.
Which the funny thing about that though is the fact that even though he's like technically the solo monster compared to the Death Knight that might not be, as presented in Dragonlance now, I don't remember him having a dragon before, but he might have. But I don't think so. So they have now have the new type of dragon in the Dragonlance book, the Death Dragon. He's got one that serves him. But he also has his 13 skeletal warriors, and also one of them is a leader, which is a little bit commander, which is a little bit better than the rest of the skeletal warriors. So even though he's technically a solo monster, he's built to actually have this retinue of really fearsome creatures following him.
You've got the ability, depending upon how you want to play that kind of campaign. Now, to be fair, I'm not, I haven't read the adventure that's in the book to see how they're specifically using him. But if you're not using the adventure and you're writing your own stuff, you've got the ability to either, have him encountered solo or with this advanced group, and that, have that much more of a challenge.
So you can actually put him up against 19th level characters, and maybe they don't just trounce him right away in the first round.
Right. So both the Death Knight and Lord Soth have an ability called Martial Undead, and usually when you strap an ability, it's supposed to be, this is what everybody gets, but in this case, it's actually something different. Lord Soth has immunity to turning, whereas the Death Knights have only advantage to checks made versus turning.
Yeah, but it's not just them. It's also all friendly undead in their presence as well, which is going to be really important in a moment.
And why is that, sir?
Well, we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, we have their attacks. Lord Soth only has a +1 higher than the Death Knight to hit, and that is obviously because of his strength.
And that works true to damage as well. Average damage on Lord Soth is going to be 28, whereas the Death Knight's at 27. So just that single point in strength is going to make that swing.
Now, there is one caveat to, because, I didn't see this initially, and then I was reading through, that I was like, oh, this is kind of lame. But then I realized that damage that Lord Soth does, until the start of his next turn, cannot be healed.
Yeah, that little extra bit makes a big difference of like, all right, if you can't heal that damage, if he is putting the womp on somebody, that can make a real big difference.
And it's not a saving throw or anything. And more than likely, you're going to find this out the hard way in, the Paladin or Barbarian are up there going toe-to-toe with Soth, and, maybe Soth is giving better than he's taking, and the Cleric or one of the other heroes are like, here, I'll just boost you up, and it's like, oh, I just wasted a spell slot, and it didn't work, and you have no more hit points.
Yeah, that's rough.
One other thing, though, if you get dropped by Lord Soth, you cannot be brought back up that round. So, you're gonna have to deal, depending, on the order turn, you're gonna have to deal with at least one death save roll, and nobody can just spring you back up with that healing word.
So I guess the real takeaway here is, and this is based off of our observation, your DM might do it differently, but magical healing doesn't work. So that would mean pretty much you're looking at using a medicine kit or using the medicine skill to kind of stabilize, and that's going to use your action to just basically stop them from death saves.
Super niche case. I mean, the healer feat technically lets you use the healer kit and give hit points back, but you would still not be able to regain those hit points. It's not just magical healing. It's just regaining of hit points.
Right.
So it's a small thing that could make a big difference in a conflict with Lord Soth.
So you need to be prepared. This guy is not going to be a simple fight.
All right, so next up, we're looking at the kind of like their special attacks, their special abilities. Lord Soth has Cataclysmic Fire, and the Death Knight has Hellfire Orb. And at first, when I first looked at Lord Soth, I was like, he doesn't even get the Fireball ability from the Death Knight. This doesn't make any sense. But what they did is they renamed it. Mm-hmm. So it's the exact same ability with one caveat.
That is if you drop or happen to be a corpse in the zone of his Cataclysmic Fire, you're getting up as an undead under his control.
Yes, a skeleton under his control, which you normally, just skeletons would mean nothing to a cleric because they could just dust them in one round, except for they're immune to that in his presence.
Yeah, so like that whole martial undead thing that we talked about earlier, it's like, he raised a skeleton, and now it's going to start, fighting you, and you can't just go away.
Yeah. Well, and next up we have spellcasting. This is actually one of the areas where I feel like the Death Knight is slightly better, even though they don't have the Paladin tag.
Mm-hmm. So Lord Soth is actually much more limited when it comes to that. He has 5 spell slots and 3 spells that he can do, as well as he can cast Command at will with a DC of 19.
Yeah, the Death Knight is going to come in 1 less at DC 18, but that's because they've got a lower Charisma score. Mm-hmm. But they actually get 15 spell castings, so basically 15 slots that they can spend, I believe, 1st through 5th. And they have 10 spells that they can draw from. Now, we're kind of oversimplifying it a little bit because Lord Soth actually, basically has, a number of castings of each spell per day, right? And I think it's like 2 of them are twice a day and 1 of them is like once a day or something along those lines. But it's significantly less than what the Death Knight can do. But that being said, he also can do Command at will.
Right.
But it's also a very low level spell.
It's a low level spell. I mean, we are looking at a DC of 19, which, given that, like, if you start using that on your more martial characters, your barbarians, your fighters, like, it's possible that they just don't have the willpower to resist. But it's going to be like stop or flee or, what have you, because it's command. You get 1 word.
Yeah, so there's not a ton you can do with it. It might be enough to knock your barbarian out of the rage. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
So next, looking at something that is a Lord Soth only ability, and that is going to be Word of Death.
I think it's like a slightly better power word kill in some ways because you just do 100 points of necrotic damage to 1 creature. It's a con save DC 19. So this is going to be pretty potent against your spellcasters. Maybe not so much against your warriors, but even if you make the save, you take half damage. And if you get dropped to 0, you die. There is no, and I think Cataclysmic Fire is like this as well, where if you get dropped to 0 from these abilities, you're a skeleton, you're dead. There's no death saves for these things.
Right. And, since we're talking about the souped up Death Knight, it really does make sense that, you have things that have these, fatalistic, or fatal abilities, because that's what this amount of fear should be bringing.
Yeah, I mean, in earlier editions too, and the way it was portrayed in, and even in the novels, it was basically him casting Power Word Kill, right? And he just commands you to die, and they die. And I think he almost kills Tasselhoff barefoot that way. Now, I will say there is one ability that's not on this list that I'm a little disappointed with. He doesn't have a fear aura. He doesn't have any fear effects. And in the novels, Kender are fearless. Like, it's a novelization, so there's no mechanics to express that. But nothing, basically they'll like crawl into a dragon's mouth to check his teeth to see what's going on there. They have no sense of self-preservation. They don't know what fear is. In the novels, Tasselhoff Barefoot knows fear for the first time in the presence of Lord Soth.
So, I mean, that could be something that, your version of Lord Soth, you just kind of tack on, that fear aura. I mean, like, dragon fear is a typical thing. So maybe they're thinking, well, maybe the death dragon that he's going to ride has got his own fear, so there's no need to double up. But he really should have his own.
So now getting into those legendary actions, he's got Implacable Maneuver. Basically, him or his mount can move up to its speed, doesn't draw attacks of opportunity, and it can also knock someone over with a if they fail a strength saving throw.
So it's a nice tactical maneuver that you can, because anytime you're talking, again, whether you're using him individually or as a unit on top of the dragon, gaining tactical advantage is always important. And whether you want to, I'm gonna legendary action move so that on my next turn I can just hit you with this awesome spell or breath weapon or what have you.
Well, yeah, it's that, or if you happen to knock them down. He also has strike as a legendary action, so if you go before that person goes, they're still prone, so advantage to attack. You can technically do it with your with your legendary action, or if you happen to do it before your turn and then you unload all of your attacks on that. I mean, it's possible you could get your legendary action, and then your turn, unloading 4 attacks at advantage. With a decent to hit to begin with, from Lord Soth, and he does a decent amount of damage, so a crit from Lord Soth hurts quite a bit.
Indeed. And of course, it should be no surprise that another legendary action is that he can be able to cast one of his spells, whether he wants to use one of those other things or one of his commands at will.
The thing about that, though, is it costs 3 actions. The strike costs 2 actions. He can run around bumping into people, up to 3 times because he gets 3 actions per turn. But so they're a little weighted, so you're probably not going to actually get 3 legendary actions. You're probably going to get 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot to say in the breakdown of how powerful Lord Soth is. So, all right, that's the caveat of him and him versus a Death Knight. But how does he shape up against other Challenge 19s?
Well, so I went through and looked at other Challenge 19s. He's a little bit on the low side for hit points, which is also problematic in another area.
And what's that?
He's also on the low side when it comes to resistances and immunities. He only has immunity to necrotic and poison damage and those conditions, and there's a couple of conditions that generally affect undead, like exhaustion. I don't know if charm is one of them, but poison, exhaustion, and there's usually one other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of it off the top of my head. So he's got that going for him. But if you look at other Challenge 19s, they tend to have resistance to more energy types or immunities.
Right. Now you do have the ability to look at this as more of a unique and an intelligent, working foe. Now, as we said, from the lore standpoint, he doesn't ambush, and he's honorable. So I think this could be the kind of person who does set things up so that he's always in an enviable situation, so that tactically things are sound. So you could, even though he doesn't have a lair situation, you could kind of create an environment that is befitting one of his stature. And it could be something where, does he have a sense of self-preservation? Does he have any kind of, I automatically come back kind of thing? And the stat block, I don't believe he's got something like that.
He does not, no.
But, you could have, all right, he's got a release factor where he can quickly get out of dodge. He can use his implacable maneuver at the end of your turn to kind of get out of combat, if you want to play him with that self-preservation, so that he is one of these more iconic TV villains that he's there, gets away, and comes back later to put up another fight.
Well, not only that, I mean, he's been killed in the novels and been brought back by the Dark Powers. Mm-hmm. So and also even in novelization, the whole reason he's there is because a Dark Power took notice of him and wanted him in their service, their employ. Mm-hmm. So it is fair to assume that others would do that as well, or that he could barter for special boons and favors. So bringing back Lord Soth shouldn't be too hard. The other area where I compared him to other Challenge 19s is his damage and to hit. His hit is a little bit on the low side, but his damage is actually a little bit on the high side. But I think I find that the challenge rating monsters of that caliber also tend to have a lot more special abilities. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that his attacks aren't considered magical. So someone with stone skin is going to get resistance against, some of the damage he does. Not the necrotic, but I guess, the other, because it's not designated magic, but I feel like it's a special weapon that he uses, so it should be, but it's not. If anything's immune to attacks that aren't magical, his physical attacks just can't hurt it.
So I would use Lord Soth, if you wanted to have a bit of fun with it, use him as a recurring villain, and whatever the most amount of damage he takes in the one combat, he then comes back more powerful and now resists that type. Especially if you're looking at something from an energy thing, I really feel like Death Knights throwing fireballs should be resistant to fire
At the least.
at the least, if not straight up immune. So that would be one of those things that I would begin looking at, and it would allow it to be make the players have to rethink of, okay, well, what happened last time? Like when you're encountering him for the third time, it's like, wait a second, he got stronger. How can we be smarter? How can we try to look at this tactically, getting ready to go into that third fight, fourth fight.
So the interesting thing, and again, like I haven't read the full adventure yet, and probably won't. Let's just be honest, right? Like we don't use pre-written adventures, but the backdrop for Dragonlance is war, right? And if Lord Soth were to come onto the field in that scenario, well, battlefields are generally littered with bodies, and for him to drop his cataclysmic fire on the party and like do a bunch of damage, and say none of them drop or whatever, but like they just watch the flames burn away the flesh from all the creatures' corpses surrounding them, and then they get up.
Yeah, when you all of a sudden see 50, 60 skeletons, stand up, around you, that adds a whole lot more, fight to the fight.
Especially if the players make some kind of quip or comment about, what are you gonna do? It's all of us versus you.
Yes, all of us.
Yeah, and then like you said, a couple dozen skeletons just pop up, and they're like, oh, I guess we spoke a little too soon.
Now who's the one outnumbered? Cleric's like, I got this. You're gonna raise a little trinket? How quaint.
Yeah, so there's definitely some surprise elements you can have fun with for Lord Soth, especially if your players aren't aware. And let's face it, it could be 50 skeletons, but if they're able to take on a challenge 19, they are more of a nuisance. And not even, they don't even equate to a hazard at that point, right?
Well,
even taking attacks of opportunity, they probably need to roll, almost a 20 even to hit.
Well, I mean, against your martial characters are probably not going to hit. I mean, heck, I ran a combat recently against, my son's character who had an AC 20. I was dealing with a +6 to hit, and I went like 4 rounds where I just couldn't get it. But, if it's around everybody, that spellcaster who might only have like a 15 or a 16, a +4 to hit, you're going to be looking at, a decent number of damage, and it might not be huge, but over the course of several rounds, that damage is going to add up.
And also just having an opponent standing next to your spellcasters, if they're making ranged attacks, they will then be at disadvantage. So, even if they want to try and ignore them and just attack Soth, well, they can do so at his much better AC at disadvantage,
right.
If it's not like an area effect or something, or a saving throw.
Now, if you're lucky, skeletons don't have a huge amount of hit points, so it's possible that, if you're lucky enough to have an invoker and you just drop a fireball at your feet, it's still going to expend resources
and clear them all out.
To clear them all out and have that round of, what have you, but it's then still a corpse on the ground that I would imagine could re-rise should, cataclysmic fire, go off again.
Well, fortunately, that can't happen, but it's only once a day, and it's not a recharge. Say both the Lord Soth abilities are once a day; they're not recharges, which makes him a little bit easier to deal with. But again, I think that they should get some resistances and immunities, some more of those Death Knights and Lord Soth. I'm a little disappointed with that. I don't know. We did a Death Knight video a long time ago, so we might have been disappointed with it back then and forgot about it. I've used them in my games, but that being said, when you're using the players are so high level, it doesn't actually matter anyway, as far as the game goes. As far as the story and the lore, I guess that's the point of contention in my brain.
Based on the lore that I've heard of Lord Soth, we're looking at him from the vantage point of Dragonlance, not Ravenloft at this point in time. So I feel like from that perspective, he might be pretty much on par with where he should be, maybe a little bit less. But how much of our opinion is being
flavored by the books,
flavored by the books, and flavored by where he eventually becomes when he gets to Ravenloft. So hey, you like this video, others like it, as well as all of the fantastic content you can find over at Nerdarchy.com. Why not come check us out on Patreon and support us over there?
Articles like, Lord Soth isn't a Death Knight, he's the Death Knight.
But hey, you're looking for another way to support Nerdarchy? Why not come check out Nerdarchy the store and get great products like Death Pit. A dark drama draws heroes into a web of intrigue at the Death Pit. A small town maintains a delicate balance with a nearby necropolis and the Death Pit shared between them. The mayor of Blackwood puts out a call for adventurers when the risen dead become problematic, but the real threat is the secret shared between the town and the Death Pit. The keepers of the necropolis, the spectral guardian hound, and the living collide with the hero stuck in the middle. Included within is a new otherworldly patron, the Necrogrim, a defender of the dead whose warlocks can awaken these restless spirits. An adventure includes a map and a background information to help game masters weave players into the tense scenario. 7 NPCs, including the Master Necromancer and their 3 apprentices. 2 new magic items, including the powerful Radiant Gate, a nearly impenetrable shield against the undead. And 2 new creatures, an avatar of Necrogrim and the Church Grim, lesser guardian hounds bound to gravesites.
So let us know what you think of Lord Soth. Did Wizards of the Coast get it right with the 5e version? Do you think he needs to be upgraded? Maybe you think Death Knights are already a little bit weak and they need to be updated for their Challenge 17 CR. So, Challenge 19 for Lord Soth isn't cut. Let us know in the comments below.
While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, click on that notification bell. You know you want to.
Quick reminder, we drop several new videos here on the channel every week, so come on back. But you can't wait till then. No worries, we got you covered. Shadowfell Foes, Death Knight riding a Shadow Dragon into battle. Dungeons & Dragons Monster BFF.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.